And so like I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about Beyond the Rift, and I was thinking about Dragon Ball Z, about how Goku's always going to win the fight in the end, and I was thinking about Superman, and I was thinking about Into the Spider-Verse, and like I was all of these things were spinning in my head, and I just kind of landed on, well, why don't I just like you could just use the Beyond the Rift conceit for a story in which the superhero always saves the day, and it's just the difference of whether you have a Superman story where he catches Lois Lane and a Spider-Man Gwen Stacy.
My name is Jeremy Gage, and welcome to the Draw Your Dice podcast. This is an educational show involving all things tabletop role-playing industry. Listen alongside me as we hear from creators, entrepreneurs, and supporters about their personal best practices, principles, and philosophies. I encourage anyone from the budding game designer to a seasoned publisher and everyone in between to sit down with us and enjoy today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Draw Your Dice podcast. My name is Jeremy Gage, as you heard in the intro, but as always, it's not about me. And in fact, I am excited to bring you one of my inspirations of the show. One of the few reasons, many reasons, but big one that I have come to do this. Marketing writer, party of one podcast host. That's a big clue right there. Drinker of sours and fruit beer and game designer, which is why we're here on the show today. I would like to welcome to the show Jeff Stormer.
The level of research that was into that was incredible. First off, I appreciate the sour beer reference because I'm excited to talk about it at any given moment. Secondly, I do have to take issue with at least one thing that you said a little bit. I think this is at least a little bit about you because this is two friends having a fun conversation. Like, I want that noted on the record. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be a great conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Woo! Woo! I am sweating. Great. Here we go. Jeff, for people who are listening who may not have heard your podcast at all, why don't you give just a brief intro of how you present yourself to the internet and the world around you?
Of course. My name is Jeff Stormer. I am a podcaster, game designer, marketing writer, and the official LARP designer of the Olive Garden restaurant. I host Party of One, which is an actual play podcast focused on two-player role-playing experiences. I'm also the co-host of All My Fantasy Children, which is a character creation, storytelling, and world-building podcast. And also, sometimes I design games, which I think is going to be a lot of what we talk about here today, including my most recent release, Anyone Can Wear the Mask, which is a superhero RPG for 3 players, about a hero, a villain, and the city that they share. I do a lot of things. I do marketing, consulting, and writing. I'm busy. I'm a busy man with a lot of hobbies. And also, I drink beers and watch wrestling a lot, and it's great. And everything's great. I do dope shit. It's great.
Yes.
There's my one swear.
Yes.
I got my one swear in. We're good.
But it's just a sort of a ceiling for anyone who may want to take that into the wrong hands. But we can swear up a storm. I am a sailor. So, in addition to the icebreaker of the show, could you also give us a little walkthrough of your game design lineage, right? You started the podcast, but like what was maybe your first RPG that you played that really got you starting to consume, and then what was the first thing that maybe started your game design spark?
Yeah, for sure. So my game design lineage starts when I was 8 years old in rural Oklahoma. We found a copy of a game called Middle-earth Role-Playing at a yard sale. Somebody was apparently giving this game away, and having now read it several times over in the decades since, I understand why. And that's not fair. It is a fine game. I'm sure, like, if you love rolling on many critical hit tables and you love D100 percentile dice, like, I'm sure it's up your alley. Like, I'm sure this game is every. I was 8 years old and I read this game and I went, I don't understand what I'm reading. It stuck in my brain. It captured something in me, but at the time I distinctly remember going like, I like role-playing games like video games. Like, I'm a big Dragon Warrior fan. I like role-playing video games, and this game says it's a role-playing game on the front, but it's this weird experience where I'm rolling on tables and I don't understand what's happening, but it's telling me that I can also imagine a hero, and that's cool. So, like, that was the thing that kind of hooked me, and I've kind of never gotten away from this quicksand that is role-playing games ever since. The thing that made me want to start creating was probably, it's interesting because I came to I always describe myself, and the reason I always describe myself as a podcaster first is that like I ultimately probably came to game design through podcasting more so than like I don't like I didn't or I don't or I like I've never really had the spark to design for design's sake. I came to kick my table as hard as I possibly could. This is a great audio experience.
I'm leaving it in.
Great audio experience. I came to podcasting first. Like I was a podcaster before I was a game designer. I came into podcasting because I fell in love with actual plays. I was a huge fan of One Shot and a huge fan of a number of other actual play podcasts that were happening. And I kind of came to a point where I was like, my wife, Jen Frank, producer of the show, we both came to a point where we were like, we want to make a thing. We both like enjoy 2-player games. We've played them together, so we want to make a thing that represents 2-player games. So we kind of started creating this podcast, and then eventually being, I think eventually like what happens is when you just read so many of a particular thing is that you eventually go like, okay, well, what about this? What if this existed? And then you find that feeling of like, well, the thing that I want doesn't exist, so I have to be the one to make it, which has kind of always been my burden to bear, is this feeling of, well, if it doesn't exist, I have to make it. So now I make things. Is arguably my journey into being a game designer is, well, I want this. Why doesn't it exist? Fine. If I have to make it, I will.
Yeah. I'll do it myself.
A lot of game design out of spite of hey.
I only create from hatred.
Only really, like, I feel like, we talk a lot about the tools that a game designer should have. We talk about, the best practices. We don't talk enough about hatred. We don't talk enough about the power of like a deep searing resentment and hatred and how that festers in your gut until you have a beautifully rendered game in front of you.
I mean, if anyone's paying attention to the Draw Your Dice podcast, you can sense why I'm creating things that I'm creating. So, what a beautiful journey. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Yeah, Middle Earth. I've never read it. I've never seen it. I've seen the movies that are based on it.
So this was a game that came out in 1992.
Mm-hmm. I would be 2 years old then. Yeah.
It came out in 1992, and it feels like a game that came out in 1992. I want to see if I can find like some charts. I want to see if I can find like an actual. Here we go. I'm gonna drop this into the Discord. Just so
I feel like it has a lot of like, what is it called? Earth Dawn and like Pendragon style design.
It's adopted really specifically from Rollmaster.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Rollmaster hack, and I dropped an image into the Discord chat of a MERP stats table. First off, MERP is an incredible acronym, and I've always been envious of it. But like, there's just a lot unfolding in this table that is pulled directly from the game.
Oh God, I wish I will put this in a Twitter post when I post this episode.
Good.
Pukel Man number 3.
The hits. You have your AT, your DB. There's your attack of 55 raw. I don't know what that means.
Am I playing Monster Hunter? What's happening?
It's so much. It is so much. And imagine being 8 years old. Imagine being 8 years old, having never seen a role-playing game before, and this is what you see. And then imagine somehow this is the thing that sticks in your head for the next 25 years.
Amazing. I love it.
I don't know how this poisoned my brain, and yet here we are.
Well, obviously the toxins are working because
here I
continue to play games to this day.
Here I am.
Yeah, in addition to that, I mean, I don't know if anyone's done like the Party of One origin story or if you have on the podcast, but I feel like that's also part of your game designer heritage, right? So my additional icebreaker question is sort of, you wanted to make something that was 2-player representative of the space, which is cool because I don't think like those style of cooperative games are real. Like, I love how I just spoke with Nevin probably a few weeks ago about Gun and Slinger, which is also sort of an example of a 2-player game. And yeah, why, like, what has that journey been like for Party of One podcast? Yeah.
So the journey there starts around when Jen and I moved in together. I had left a long-time D&D group, not a long-time D&D group. I've been playing with them for like 3 or 4 months, but like I left like a weekly D&D group, and I had like we had moved to a different city, and literally just one day I was feeling sad that like I had lost like a weekly like role-playing game, and Jen just goes, "Why don't you find a game that the two of us can play together?" And I was like, "All right, I can look into it." This was 2011. There were not very many of them. And so I started doing research. I found a few games. We played some games together. We found that we really enjoyed it. And then eventually cut forward a few years of, looking into this, and this always kind of being a thing that I had kind of kicked around and been like, what's out there now? When we started to talk about like I'd like to do a podcast, we both kind of looked at the games that we had talked about and games that we played and like the games that we enjoyed, and it was like, oh well, there's a lot of two-play like, and it was partially like, I mean, I know them. I've been researching them for several years, right? Like I've been looking into ways to make this, and also the other half of it, sort of the honest half of it, and I think it's important to talk about this stuff. Is it was kind of, there was a look around and there was like, well, nobody's doing this. Like there's not really like another podcast that is like saying like we're gonna explicitly make 2-player games the thing, right? Like it was sort of a recognizing that like this was something that wasn't necessarily being done, and like so it was kind of a vibe of like, well then why don't we try it, and then if it doesn't work out, we can it in 6 months, and if it works out, great. And it's been 5.5 years, and so it's worked out pretty well.
I love it. That's very, 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 very cool, and I'm happy to have it on the internet. I'm happy you created it.
I am too. I'm extremely happy about it.
Yeah, 2-player games. I haven't played too many. The only one that I would consider like a cooperative 2-player game, and it's not even really specifically structured for that, but Ironsworn I've played with my partner on an old.
I love Ironsworn. Fantastic game.
Great game.
Cannot endorse it enough.
Yeah,
really,
cannot undersell it at all.
Really just well designed, well created. All of it, top to bottom. Extremely
Fun fact for any of the listeners in here, I used to have an old actual play channel called Roll to Forge, where I played with a bunch of buddies of mine. We played some Blades in the Dark stuff. We played some Band of Blades stuff. And in one segment, me and my partner played Ironsworn co-op together. So if you ever want to go check out that stuff, listeners, feel free. It's out there on the YouTubes.
And that is on itself something that like I'm so impressed with what Sean did with Ironsworn is like making the way that it really like the solo, guided, and co-op modes like are all so designed so intentionally and so well put together that it is the most impressive. Like as a designer, I remember flipping through that and going like, oh wow, this is really well done.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I can even see like, I think once we get into, because this origin story, right, has been great. When we get into Anyone Can Wear the Mask, I can see a lot of the influence from both your love for 2-player style games, but also the shift of modes and how that sort of comes through in your design. I guess since I said it, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this bad boy.
Great segue.
Thank you, expert podcaster, for validating me. Let's talk about Anyone Can Wear the Mask.
Let's do it.
So, talk to me about the spark thought. Why make this game?
So this game is my Anyone Can Wear the Mask. The 30-second pitch, like I said, is a 3-player. It is a game for 1 to 3 players about a hero, a villain, and the city that they share. It is a superhero game inspired by stories like Superman in Metropolis and Spider-Man in New York and Batman in Gotham. It is about a hero who defends their specific city from a series of everyday threats and then ultimately the big nemesis that appears. The spark of it is, on some level, this is my 10 years late bachelor's thesis, which I guess technically isn't really a thing. I don't think you technically write a bachelor's thesis, but like this is my 10 years late college thesis because I majored in superhero comics in college. I have an English degree with a concentration in superhero comics.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so this is my thesis statement. Like this is my essay. This is my love letter to the thing that like I have dedicated my life to studying. This is my and so the origin story for it is really, I mean, it starts with Beyond the Rift, right? Like it starts with Deep Anyways Beyond the Rift, which is an incredible, unbelievable game and is just like breathtakingly good in its presentation, in its mechanics, in its themes, in its writing. D crushed every part of that game, and like reading it was like, I remember reading it like in my living room on a whim. Like I had bought it and I was like, I'm just reading it and just being like, wow, oh my god. And as I was reading it, I don't remember if D talked about this or how like the idea kind of got into my head, but I want to say they had tweeted at some point about like hacking their games. I want to say it was something like that, or maybe I imagined that and the idea was already in my head. Either of those possibilities are equally valid. But like the idea had gotten into my head, and I started reading this through, and there's this really brilliant thing that exists in Beyond the Rift. There's this brilliant conceit. Beyond the Rift is a 1 to 3 player game about Metroidvania style platformer games. Or more specifically, like it is in the vein of like a Hollow Knight. Like it is very much like it evokes a lot of Hollow Knight in its design. And one of the things that it does, and it's really, really, it's a brilliant game design conceit, is when you flip a card, the protagonist is presented with a challenge, and then you roll a d6, and what that d6 represents is not whether or not the protagonist is going to overcome the challenge. You are not rolling to see whether Simon Belmont can jump from platform to platform. You're rolling to see how many times Simon Belmont has to die before you make that jump. Like you are rolling to see the level of frustration and the level of like difficulty and the amount of times you have to fail before you can succeed. Which is for a game evoking that genre, that style, like that play experience, is so fundamentally clever, right? Like it is so, because it goes beyond like recreating the physical experience of like exploring a space and having it kind of grow out and map out, becoming into something really like capturing the emotional experience of that game, which is I can't make this platform because a Medusa head hits me and then I fall backwards into the pit, and it's happened 15 times until I finally realize I have to whip mid jump in order to hit the Medusa head. Like it plays at the emotional experience of playing through that in a tabletop format, which is brilliant.
That's awesome. There's also another game, Rhapsody of Blood by
UFO Press.
Thank you. Yes, UFO Press, that also has a similar like Metroidvania feel and exploration mechanics to it, which is very, very cool.
This is also where I shout out another thing. Rhapsody of Blood Terra Incognita is a supplement for Rhapsody of Blood that I am quoted on the Itch.io page because I told Mina unprompted that it is one of my like favorite things to have in games. Of like, I love flipping. I just love like making weird stuff. I love just making weird objects and like castles. It's the best little weird castle making supplement. I love it. This is me raving about things that I like now.
I love it.
But the thing that I got from Beyond the Rift is I was flipping through it and I was thinking about that mechanic of like, what does it mean that it's such an interesting approach to assume success, to assume like not just like failing forward, like not just to assume that something is always going to happen, but to assume that the person who is making this roll, who's rolling this dice, is always gonna win. There's no question about what this person is going to do, and like there's no question of that this person at the end of this dice roll is going to be able to say, I overcome this obstacle. That was such a like game, like mesmerizing. Like I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Like other games have done stuff like that, right? Like there's like a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games. Like the roll is like on a 6-, you still get the thing, but like I had never seen it so clarified and written with such specificity in the text of like, no, like there is no opportunity for you to say that you simply don't succeed at this. Like it's in the text, you win, but what this win means depends on the dice roll.
Yeah, what did it take, right? What did you have to sacrifice, or what did you have to give up to accomplish your task? Yeah, I've been examining the Drifter RPG, which is based on Hyperlight Drifter, the video game by Metal Weave Games / Andreas Walters. Shout out to them. And I've been doing like basically a D&D Drifter hack. But what I like about Drifter, and what you're also pointing to, is this sense of like the players are competent. Like the characters in which they're vesseling are competent. They know how to swing a sword. They know how to shoot a bow. And I think one of the disconnects for D&D for me with the pass-fail system is that why, as a person who's trained in archery, shooting wide, missing, like that doesn't seem really plausible to me. It should be more in the hands of the adversary they're coming against, right? They knew how to put up their shield. They knew how to dodge. It wasn't that you missed. It was that they made you miss, right? That's what I like more.
And that's like it's I was thinking about this, and I was kicking around. I was like, that's such an interesting mechanic. And as I was reading Beyond the Rift, I was engaging with one of the best Superman stories that has ever been written, and that is a TV series by the name of Dragon Ball Z.
Goku really is just Superman. It's
so fun. Like I adore that Toriyama at the start of Dragon Ball Z takes Superman's origin story outright and is like puts it on a character that like in Dragon Ball it's never implied that any of this is happening, and then just goes like, all right, new series, guess what? Alien, Superman Rift, all of them are evil. That's where we're at now. And it's like, okay, cool.
I'm here with it. I'm vibing.
So I was immediately thinking about so I was watching Dragon Ball Z. And I was reading Beyond the Rift, and I was like, there's the seed of a great like fighting anime story here in terms of like the beat of like Goku's always gonna win his fight, but like it's about rolling the dice. And then I started fiddling with this, and I was like, you know what, like candidly, I don't think the world needs another quote unquote anime RPG by a white guy. I don't think we need that.
Yeah.
So I shelved the idea and like left it for a while, and then like, but the idea never kind of left my head. And so but then I started to think, I was like, well, wait, that's a thing that I don't like in superhero RPGs. I was like, that's a thing that I don't like in superhero RPGs, like with the exception of Masks, which like builds a very specific conceit of like you are teenagers and like you are still figuring out what your powers are and like how you fit into the world. Every superhero RPG that I've ever played allows for the possibility that Superman can just not catch someone when they are falling from a building. And that's always been a point of frustration for me, because like because like it's a game conceit that does not match like why I care about superheroes. It doesn't match like what makes a superhero story relevant and meaningful to me. Is this possibility that like I will make this character, I will build this myth, I will build this folkloric figure, and then they just won't do the thing. They just won't do the thing that they're supposed to do. And so like I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about Beyond the Rift, and I was thinking about Dragon Ball Z, about how Goku's always going to win the fight in the end, and I was thinking about Superman, and I was thinking about Into the Spider-Verse, and like all of these things were spinning in my head, and I just kind of landed on, well, why don't I just like, you could just use the Beyond the Rift conceit for a story in which the superhero always saves the day, and it's just the difference of whether you have a Superman story where he catches Lois Lane in a Spider-Man Gwen Stacy moment. Like, I was like, oh, and then honestly, as soon as I kind of had that moment of realization, the rest of the game kind of clicked into place, fueled most specifically by the, going back to me saying that this is my college thesis, the hours and hours, and I cannot stress this enough, hours of time I spent watching my roommates zip around New York City in the game Spider-Man 2, the video game based on the major motion picture. I could also see, and if I were being less honest, Jeremy, if I was being less honest with you as an interviewer, I would say Spider-Man PS4, but I have not played Spider-Man PS4, so I have the same experience from a movie tie-in game from 15 years ago. Yeah. There's that experience of, like, Spider-Man going around the city and going to places and meeting people and, like, and I was like, a Beyond the Rift game, like a Beyond the Rift hack, where you are a hero going from place to place in your city, saving people and meeting people and, you know, flipping dice or flipping cards and being like, okay, cool, I have a place in my city. Here's the person in danger. And then I roll some dice to see if I can save them. And, like, the rest of the game kind of fell very neatly into place from there, right? Like a lot of the game's beats from Beyond the Rift. Beyond the Rift does the thing that Anyone Can Wear the Mask does, where you flip a Joker and the adversary becomes apparent. And I was like, okay, so how do I recreate that and I thought about it for maybe 30 seconds before I landed on, oh yeah, that's just when Darkseid comes and ruins your day. Like, that's just when the Joker blows up a bunch of buildings. I was like, okay, that's in every and once I kind of realized, like, that's a beat in every superhero movie, I was like, oh, okay. Well, then that should just be the arc of the game, right? The arc of the game should build you to that moment where you lose to the major villain. You never really lose before that, even if you can't save everyone. But eventually you get back up and you save the day. And the city kind of helps you do that. And it like, a lot of the superhero media that I love is in Beyond the Rift in different places. Or Beyond the Rift, oh my god. Is in Anyone Can Wear the Mask in different places. I spent so long raving about this game that I like, that I was just like, that's the name of the game that I have. That's my game.
I love it. There are a couple of things in that last explanation and in Anyone Can Wear the Mask that I've taken really to heart as a designer as well. So the first bit, just to talk about, like, Goku for a hot second. Is that Goku, in my recalling of the series, Goku has only sacrificed himself one time, and that was versus Cell. Spoilers for Dragon Ball Z, I guess, if you haven't already watched it. But, you know, Goku only sacrificed himself one time. Every other villain has, like, pushed Goku's buttons by sacrificing another character, right? Mostly Krillin. Almost always Krillin. Sometimes Yamcha. But what's interesting is that when you bring up the fact that the superhero sort of never really fails at the thing that they're meant to superhero, right? The villain always has to push, especially when they're, like, an invincible type superhero, like Superman or Goku. The villain always has to push the buttons around the characters. What I really love about Anyone Can Wear the Mask is that you have a lot of details for adding people to the story arcs, right? Making the weaknesses of the hero apparent, especially if they're not or if they are an immortal type of person.
And a big thing with that was, like, is there's two kind of beats to that really sealed home. Like, that was such a huge part of the design choice for me, was to make it that, like, ordinary people and places were going to be a huge part of the game. You spend as much time in the game, like, per minute, like, if you're looking at, like, a time map of the game, you spend an equal amount of time learning about the owner of this diner as you do learning about the hero who is swooping in and saving. And that was a very intentional thing, because that is my favorite thing in superhero comics, probably bar none, is ordinary people who live in this world of superheroes. Like, Marvels, like, the book Marvels is one of my, like, all-time favorite comics, and that is just, the Marvels is a book about a photographer in the 60s who is just witnessing Marvel Comics happen. Like it is about a photographer in the 60s working for the working for the Daily Bugle, who one day sees Galactus outside of his window, and like one day and like watches the Fantastic Four and become superheroes, and watches his boss J. Jonah Jameson get real angry at this teenage kid vigilante.
I want
Spider-Man.
pictures of Spider-Man.
Like it is all these things, these characters, and it's all just filtered through the perspective of like I am just watching this happen, and like that is my absolute favorite. All of my favorite like comic book characters are people like Bibbo Bibowski, who if the name doesn't immediately jump out to you, I'm going to explain this just for those in the audience who might not be intently familiar with my favorite character, Bibbo Bibowski.
Yeah, I'm not aware.
Bibbo is a dock worker in Metropolis. That's it. That's his deal. He is a dock worker in Metropolis, and he shows up often, and I love him. I love him with all of my heart. He's just Superman's buddy who works at the docks, and that's great. Those are the characters that I adore. So like I wanted to, and I love the other sort of point of reference that I will give is one of my all-time favorite comic runs is a 90s comic called Starman, which is about like a legacy hero inheriting a golden age superhero's power, and like they spend so much time like building the city that this character exists in as like a real place with people, and you get to know like locations, and this city feels like a real place with real history to it, and I wanted that really in the game because I wanted the end result to be like that you feel like you have a real place, right? Like you feel like you have a city that people can live in, and that is something beautiful to me in superhero comics. And the other half of that, what you were talking about, is like highlighting a hero's kind of weakness. I think I kind of actually approach it from the opposite perspective. Which is me saying you're wrong. Now's where we get combative.
I'm here for it. Tell me about your game you wrote so that I don't have to make wrong opinions about it.
No, I think you're exactly right. Like they're the people that the hero protects, and they're the people that are in danger, and they're the hero's kind of obligation. So I think you're exactly right in that. But like the thing that is also the other side of that's really important to me is and this is me breaking down the ending of the game using a hyper specific superhero reference. The end of the game is an almost beat for beat recreation of one of my favorite superhero moments of any medium ever. And that is a very specific scene from the movie Spider-Man 2. We're focusing a lot on different iterations of Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
Spider-Man 2 has one of the greatest superhero scenes ever written. And there's some of it is ham-fisted, but in a way that like all superheroes are ham-fisted. It's the scene where the ending of Anyone Can Wear the Mask is the villain wins. You flip the Joker, the villain wins. Much of the city is destroyed. You're pulling cards out of the deck. You're throwing them away. The villain ostensibly wins. The hero is beaten back. It is stated in the text, this is the only time the hero, capital F, fails. And then the city, the people in the city, the player that has spent the entire game making up ordinary people and watching people that they create get put in danger, steps up and says, no, like, we believe in you. We see what you've done. We see how you've helped us, and we want you to help us one last time and stop this threat. Like, we know that you can come back stronger. And then the hero accepts that and comes back stronger and saves the day and ultimately defeats the villain. This is almost a beat-for-beat recreation of the scene in Spider-Man 2 where Dr. Octopus throws a subway at Spider-Man, and he webs the sides of the buildings, and he's holding on. He's got his arms stretched, and he slows it down, and they pull him into the subway car, and he's got his mask ripped off, and the kid walks up to him and goes like, you dropped this. And everybody stands around him, and they're like, don't worry, we're not going to tell anybody. And he puts on his mask, and he goes and he fights Dr. Octopus and saves the day. One of the greatest pieces of like that, all three of the parts of that scene is Anyone Can Wear the Mask. Like, that's the game. Is the villain does a horrible thing. the hero stops it, and then the city, like the people that the hero saved go, okay, thank you, we believe in you, and we are going to help you do the thing that you can do. Because the other part of the game, and this is me getting into my comic book superhero as metaphor. The other half of the thesis is this is a very early Superman, like Siegel and Schuster, Golden Age Superman, as Superman was originally created, not as Superman was co-opted by $1 billion corporation. Picture of Superman as community mutual aid, which is in my eyes what the ideal of a superhero is. It is the picture of someone accepting they have the capacity to do good for others in a certain specific context, and choosing to do that directly for the good of people, not for established power structures. Like that is, if I had to boil the idea of a superhero down, the things that resonate with me about a superhero and the things that I don't like about modern superhero media, it is Superman's not a cop. Superman is not is not beholden to power structures. Superman is someone that has power enough that he is not beholden to any existing structure. And that he could be the ultimate, like, iron fist representation of that power structure. And instead he chooses to save cats from trees and catch people as they fall out of buildings, or as he does in All-Star Superman, like, before somebody is about to step off of a building, grab them and say, I'm here for you and I'm ready to support you, and give them a hug. Like, it is somebody with all the power in the world to enforce their will, saying, well, I'm going to help people who don't have power and don't have a voice. And then he becomes a reporter. Like, anyway, I forget why we got to this question.
Don't cry, Jeff. It's fine.
You say that, but I did get a little choked up talking about
I can see it. No. I see it in how connected you are to that version of the story. And, you know, the first thing I thought about when you talked about how Superman isn't like a police officer, I think about for what I know of superheroes and their canons, I know that there's a version of Superman, it's like a parallel universe one where he's like a tyrant or something like that. Like he kind of rules Metropolis and like the world essentially.
Yep.
And I always found that version, like I always think about like Superman is the strongest entity within like 100 light years or whatever the distance requires, and like if he wanted to, he could probably smash the Earth in half, but he chooses not to, and that's what makes Superman and Goku, to some respect, relatively good people.
And that's the thing I love about Superman, is that he has the power. I wrote it very specifically in the game that this is a story. This is an imaginary story about someone with great power who chooses to use that power purely for good. And like that to me is a superhero story, right?
Yeah.
It is a story about someone choosing to use the gifts, the powers, the abilities, the ways that they can help people to uplift people, rather than to lift them up rather than to push them down. That to me is, and that is the game. That's the superhero story that I wanted to write, and that's what I wanted to put into Anyone Can Wear the Mask.
Yeah, and also to add to the fact that the city reciprocates to the hero as well in that Spider-Man moment you mentioned earlier as well. Just to commiserate. So I'm a big anime person. I've been watching anime since I was 6 years old. My dad loved anime and got me like some of the first anime I watched was like Rama 1/2 and Project Eiko and stuff like that. Like 70s, 80s style anime.
Right, yeah.
And there's a recent shonen that came out called Demon Slayer. It's been a manga for a while. And what it does to the shonen genre, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because it kind of like shifts the style of the protagonist a lot. So if we compare it to a shonen like Naruto or My Hero Academia, which are fairly popular animes on the mainstream, both of those protagonists want to be the best of something. Their whole like story is to be the Hokage, is to be the number one hero. Tanjiro in Demon Slayer, all he wants to do is turn his sister back to a human being. No spoilers because this like happens in episode 1. But he doesn't want to be like the best demon slayer. He doesn't want to wield the ultimate techniques of his martial art or his superpowers. It's all a means to an end. And at the end of the day, when his sister is saved, he will stop being a demon slayer and go live in the mountains with his sister. Like what's cool about that is that like it's a truly altruistic view of, you know, their concept of the safety and success of the collective rather than the individual, and that all the people he helps out along the way, even the demons that he slays, he has empathy, he has recompense for what they've been going through, and in many times he doesn't brutally end any demon. He often will do it out of a state of like mercy or out of a state of like, I know what you're going through, and I know there's a part of you that doesn't want to live like this anymore. So I think that it's really cool that you make that type of story where the hero is just someone who's out there to help. I think what I'm trying to say here, I think trying to put it into one sentence is that this doesn't feel like a power fantasy. That's not what it feels like.
I love that you put it like that. And because like, there was a Twitter thread by a dear friend of mine, Jadzia Axelrod, who was talking about superheroes. Jadzia is a fellow superhero enthusiast, and she was talking about how superheroes, when you boil them down, like a superhero is a power fantasy, right? Like superhero to fantasize about a superhero is to quite literally fantasize about power. They are, and the important thing to consider. And this was something that I put a lot of thought into with Anyone Can Wear the Mask, is whose power fantasy are you telling? Because I think that is like the biggest criticism that you can like point at a superhero is like, whose power fantasy is this, right? Like, is this, and to me, the ideal, and this points back to Superman, this points to Spider-Man, the best of superheroes to me are power fantasies of marginalized and like not silence, but like marginalized and like people who don't have a sense of like power and structure and safety, building a fantasy of like what it would look like if somebody gave us that power and security and fantasy and safety in an altruistic sense, right? Like Superman and Superman's one of Superman's close relatives, like Superman and Captain America, are both characters that were created by Jewish authors in the 1930s, like as a representation of like I am living in an unsafe time. This is a character that represents a level of safety and protection. Spider-Man like both in, you know, Peter Parker, Miles Morales, Gwen Stacy, whatever your Spider person is, represents a person of like being young and being burdened with like adulthood and like and still but being able to kind of like enact a positive change in the world despite all of that. Like that power fantasy is very good. It's what I love about superheroes. And so like it was something that I was really consciously thinking about when writing Anyone Can Wear the Mask, was because like as I was mid writing it was when I saw this Twitter thread and went, okay, let me step back. Like I have to really think about this.
Yeah.
And one of the nice things that I think is in the game, like there's a nice touch in the game that kind of like gets at that a little bit, which is there is a mechanic in the game, and it states at several points throughout that like people in positions of power and authority do not like your superhero. Like however you make them, whatever powers you give them, whether they have no powers or they're a living god, like it is canon in the works of the game. Like 3 things are canon in the text of Anyone Can Wear the Mask. People in power don't like your hero. People in power are actively choosing not to make the world a better place. Like there are people that could be doing what you're doing and are just flat out choosing not to. and you as a hero are choosing to do what they're not. Like, you're choosing to improve, to make things better for people on whatever scale you can reasonably do that.
Yeah.
I wanted to make that specific because that to me is really important. Partially because, we're living in 2021, right? Like, that is it's people in power it's a thing, and it's very true to like what a superhero is, right? Like, a superhero is someone like the fantasy of a superhero is, well, what if you had the power to make things better and you actually did it? And like that to me was what I wanted to bake that in. So I appreciate you pointing out like power fantasy, because that was really consciously on my mind of like, how do I write a superhero power fantasy that I, as a queer person living in 2020, like, how do I make that a power fantasy that I feel comfortable existing in the world? How do I put out a power fantasy that doesn't represent the world that I don't like? How do I not create a power fantasy that includes me and includes my voice? How do I write that into a story and the end result was anyone can wear the mask?
Yeah, it's all very versatile when it comes to, because you lay sort of no groundwork for, or no restrictions onto like what version of a hero can be, right? You mentioned like anywhere from living god to vigilante to like even like Bilbo the dock worker, right? Like, Bilbo probably does heroic things. And did I say Bilbo? Is it Bebo or Bilbo?
It's Bibbo.
Bibbo, excuse me. I did both wrong.
Here's the thing. Bilbo, if you're doing a heroic story about a dock worker who is also a hobbit with a magical ring, I'm all about this. I'm here for this.
But some of the, I think for some people, and this, I want to caveat, grain of salt this and that. I'm not trying to punch down on any of our law enforcement workers who really mean well in the world. But I think something to look at is that the status quo is kept, but like the people who made the rules and the structures by which we live by here in 2021 of the vacuum of America is that it's to maintain the order that has been present since the country's inception, right?
Yeah, right.
And that what we're playing, and anyone can wear the mask, is the person's like, okay, I do have power and authority in my own way, and I am actively going against the current status quo because the status quo is not designed for everyone. It's designed for the people who made it, right? Who made the status quo. So I think that's also sometimes in this show, I think it's also interesting to examine the message that a piece of literature, right?
Yeah, right.
Can send to the person playing it, albeit consciously or subconsciously.
100%.
Right? And I love it. I love all of that. I love that those things were at the forefront in principle of the design of this. And I love that you were able to find a way to escape the power fantasy of super powered individuals, because that's not what the story is about. It's about the emotional care you have for the people that you're helping. Yeah. And then the emotional care that is reciprocated upon you from there's always this two-way street of, I'm helping you, so we're here to help you when the time comes.
That's so much of what I was after with the game is like, I was thinking a lot about, and the more I talk about the game, the more I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that really was the thing that was on my mind, was like mutual aid was the thing on my mind, right? Was like, if I am One Punch Man, right? Like, if I'm One Punch Man and my thing is that I can defeat anyone with one punch, then my role in a better world is to punch the thing that needs to be punched. But in exchange, like, finding a world in which, like, if I have this power, then finding the way to apply that meaningfully and purposefully and and communally, and then thinking about, okay, well then what's the other half of that, right? Like, the other half of that being, if my role is to offer protection in sort of a communally focused way, having that relationship, the relationship between hero and city, where the other people's role is to say, okay, like, you've done this, but we recognize the weight that goes into it, and we're here to support you in that. Like, that was a very intentional thing, and I think it's a lot. It's a game about you put it exactly right just now. Like, it's a game about like caregiving, which is ironic because it's a superhero game about like blowing up asteroids that are coming to the planet. But like, it's a game about caregiving. I had a great conversation. I had some great conversations as I was writing this game about like, this is a game about giving and receiving care to one another, right? Like, this is a game about like shouldering responsibility and saying like, I have to do this thing, and then asking for support and receiving the support from the people that you are helping, and then when you need it, having those people there, right? Like, having those same people be like, you helped me when I needed it, so now I can help you and I can return that favor, is to me the secret heart of the game. Like, that to me is the heart of what I'm doing with the game. Is I'm here to help you when you need it, and I hope that you can return the favor when I need it. And like, that to me is what the game is all about.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's beautiful. The sort of second piece, game design wise, that I kind of looked at this and that you mentioned a little bit earlier in the show, is that you make each location matter. So like one of the, and by that you anchor it with something meaningful to the hero in your fictional positioning pieces of like, hey, you find an ally here, you find a rival here, or you and I think what I like about that is, and someone said this to me, I don't remember who I was talking to, but someone talked about how, it was Randy Lubin was talking about how in films or in shows, when locations change, sometimes that also means that the act or the arc of the story changes as well. Like, location change also means a change of act or arc.
Yeah.
And what, in that advice and in this game, one of the things that, and I'm always comparing this to the most played role-playing game in the world, but there's always this.
It's weird that you would compare it to itself, but that's fine.
Listen, Jeff, I agree. But there's always that travel phase or whatever that doesn't really mean anything. Like the walk through, you give it a name, right? You give it the name like the Black Marsh. You give it a name like the Lost Forest or something like that. But it doesn't really ever matter, because it's just a means to an end to get to the actual location that you gave weight. And what I like about Anyone Can Wear the Mask is that every location matters. You draw out a map, you kind of make this bullet journal situation happen for you as you play the game. And what it does is two things. One, it makes every location carry narratively. Second is that, and I think it's the thing that like DMs for D&D always search for in like backstories or when people get attached to something, is like, for the villain, it gives the villain something to point to every time.
Oh yeah.
Every time. There's never like, why would I ever point to the Black Marsh when it never matters, right? But I will point to Joe's Deli because I know that you get a sandwich from Joe every day at noon, and that's a part of your daily habit. And what if Joe just wasn't there one day? Where's Joe? And I think that's very cool to add that sort of weight to locations, and I think it allows for more emergent narrative to occur rapidly, rather than having sort of this fluff in between time. Like, I don't care that I'm walking down 68th Avenue over to Joe's Deli, but also if 68th Avenue is where I meet my crush every day on my way to Joe's Deli before they go into work, that matters now, right?
Side note, I'm immediately invested in this story, and I'm like, what's going to happen with are they going to Joe's Deli? I love, and like the thing that I love about like the locations in Anyone Can Wear the Mask is, you're exactly right. Like, there's something beautiful about, and it's something that I think is lost a lot in games, like you said, like the travel portions of games, and like, but the other place that I think it gets lost a lot, ironically, is superhero comics.
Interesting.
I think that like you don't, and like it's something that like I love in this game is like, I love, like you said, locations matter. I really like that. I like that it's not just it's because like you know there's very often in a superhero scenario, if you're picturing like the platonic ideal, you're on a city street. Like what city street? Like but like thinking about like but living in a city, right? Like living in Philadelphia and like looking around like streets and neighborhoods like have stories, have people, and like I wanted to bring that out, and I wanted to capture a thing that I really do love in superhero comics, which is it's not just a building. Like this is not just a skyscraper. It's a skyscraper of the Daily Planet. It's got the big globe on the top of it. We have an emotional connection to that place, and the hero does. But also, like I think equally importantly, like we as the reader have an association with that, right? Like, we have an association with Pop's Diner in Riverdale because we see it all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like you could have this scene take place in any restaurant, but we have it in Pop's Diner because that's the restaurant that like the characters know and that we as the reader also know.
Yes.
Like having and that's the and I love that specifically because like it means that every location gives us that experience, right? Like if you and I create Joe's Deli, right? It's down the street from where you meet your crush. It's where you get your sandwich every day. They make nobody orders it because nobody thinks to order. You only order it if you live on that block, but they have the best French dip in town. Like you're not gonna find you're not gonna find anywhere close. The au jus is just it's made fresh every day. It's fantastic. We make that place. Then later on in the story, when we're trying to like come up with where the scene where you meet your crush is, we go, okay, it's outside of Joe's Deli. Like we have that association. We've created these places, and it's what I love about the game because it creates locations that matter. And the other part of it that I love is like the turn structure of it, because the turn starts with you flipping it and like describing a location and people. It captures another thing that I love from superhero comics, which is I'm a single issues guy. I love reading like a single discrete issue of a story and going like I love, you know, we open in Joe's Deli, right? Like we open in this location, we learn about this location. Oh no, then a supervillain shows up, and then the hero shows up. But like that experience of like the issue structure, right? The very discrete, like here is an issue of a superhero comic being a turn of Anyone Can Wear the Mask. I love it. It makes me so happy because you get to tell these little concrete 15-minute stories, and it just is it's a wonderful, joyful thing that I adore.
I think also what this game captures is a sense of proper scope. So like when for anime, like I think about the superhero examination that currently is My Hero Academia.
Sure, yeah.
And how we get to know a lot about the superheroes and the villains, and I feel like the city is very left behind. Like I don't know about any citizens unless they are like
That's
relative to the immediate plot, right? It's and not only that, but then I also think about the Avengers, how we have they have their allies and their friends and their relationships, but we never really get to like know about the city. Like I don't me and my partner do this every time we watch something where a building gets destroyed. I'm like, that's 10,000 people dead right there. Like nobody's gonna talk about that.
Nobody's talking about there's two things that I adore. I have two things to point to that I genuinely like adore, and one of them was a tweet that was going around yesterday, and the other thing is a plot point in a movie. There is a reason that what is hold on, I have to look up the character's name.
Go ahead.
I know it's Michael Peña's character from Ant-Man, and I don't remember his character's name. Luis. There's a reason that Luis is the most popular character from Ant-Man, and it's because he's just a guy. He's just a guy with interesting stories. I love Louis. Louis is so good. And like you're exactly right. And the other thing that's been going around is a clip from the movie The Avengers when like a building explodes and people are running and there's just one lady who just books it. And like everybody's running in the kind of the movie like, oh, and this person just like pushes someone aside and just barrels, and it's like that's how I would react. Yeah, like I just watched a building. Like I'm not hanging. I'm not a physically active man, but I'm getting out of there. I'm not hanging around. And like you're right. Like I want to know her story. Like, I want to know that person's deal, right? Like, I want to know. I love stories about ordinary people.
Yeah. I think it grounds the superhero. You know what I mean? Like, when we talk about the power level structure of something and like that suspense and disbelief, I don't think when like My Hero, when I think about the Avengers, it all gets like washed because like, oh, what the only stakes that can exist is like the planet or the whole city, right? There's no stakes for like Joe's Deli. There's no stakes for my crush that I sort of know tangentially in 78th Street means a lot to us. Or like her apartment is right here or their apartment, whatever have you. And like, it's there's no grounding. There's no grounding for stories that really focus on just the superhero and then like the cosmic stakes that are unfolding. You know what I mean? I think why recently like Spider-Verse was one of my favorite movies and why Spider-Man always sticks out to a lot of people. And like the Spider-Man hero, not just the movies.
Yeah, like as a character,
as all versions, but like as a character is like Spider-Man doesn't have crazy superpowers, and all the people that he deals with are like mad scientists, burglars, other genetically altered people that are not immortal by any stretch of the imagination. And there's so many places that like Peter Parker, Miles, Gwen care about, they visit on the daily. Like that, I think you're gonna have to correct me if I'm wrong. My comic book lineage is non-existent, actually. But I feel like I've seen scenes or comic book strips where Peter visits that grocery store again, that convenience store that burglar was in.
I want to say I'm sure it's happened. I'm sure that's a scene that has played out.
But that's gonna where that dude was, like, that's gonna live forever with Peter Parker, and that place is gonna live forever with us, right?
Yeah, for sure.
When it's compared to like My Hero, like I only sort of know where Deku's mom lives. Like if Shibuya is in trouble, like I don't know. Like, does it matter? Like, we don't know about any of those people there. So why does that building getting destroyed or this sewer system getting blown out matter to the story at all? Why not just talk about a small village where all of these superheroes exist, and maybe we'd have something more emotionally concrete for the atmosphere? And that's not to say like people who are watching this, you aren't attached to like Deku or Bakugo or All Might or whatever have you. But, we're talking about the scope, like being attached to the scope of the story, especially in comparison to anyone can wear the mask.
And it's about creating a world. Like there's also just like a world building element to it. One of the things that like I like about the game that like from a marketing perspective I leaned really hard on when promoting the game. And this was a very conscious decision, in part because in part out of like marketing promotional reasons, and in part because in my head I was like, this is the ideal use of the game, was using this game in conjunction with like an ongoing superhero role-playing game like that you're already playing. So we did I was on, I want to say 15 Masks actual plays. I did so many Masks actual plays. But like, and that was a very intentional decision because I was like, I want to do a thing where like I go onto a superhero themed actual play podcast and we make a bunch of locations and we make a bunch of people, and then you just have those. And like that's the thing that I love is like it like you said, like it creates locations that mean something to us as people. Like as viewers, as the audience of our comic, like it creates locations that have a meaning to us. So like it's just a cool thing. It's a cool possibility of the game that like you can drop this into a Masks game and be like, okay, cool, we played this, we have this cool story that we told, and also I can now start my next story at Joe's Deli. Like, I know that this place exists. Like, and then immediately all the other people at the table are like, oh yeah, okay, cool. No, I know what that is. Like, we saw that. You get that association because, like, there is nothing, and like the Spider-Man example is a great example. Like, there's nothing there, like, you're not like that grocery store is like, you can go to any grocery store, or you can go to the grocery store where Spider-Man didn't stop a burglar, that, you know, and like, that's gonna have that's immediately gonna have resonance, and your audience is immediately gonna be like, okay, I'm in. I want to see what happens here. Things that happen in this location have stakes now that we're at this location. Creating a game that creates those locations and those stakes, like, that's just a cool world building element, and it's something that, like, brings me a lot of joy that it exists in the game, in terms of, this is a thing that you can, this is a way to use the game. It is a way to interact with this thing, and I think it's very cool.
Yeah, I think it's very cool as well. And you have to, because I hinted at it earlier, it's sort of maybe like the last bits for anyone can wear the mask here, but you also have some different like optional rules, modes of play that you offer in the book that seem very inspired by A, the style of games that you're interested in, and B, also the style of games that Party of One podcast is based around. So, you know, you have a player for the hero, you have a player for the villain, you have a player for the city, but then what talk to me about, like, was it principal design that there were going to be other modes of play for this game?
So there were a few reasons for that. There were a few reasons for that. One of them is the last, like, major game that I wrote was Mission Impossible. Was Mission Accomplished. There's a salute in the title. Mission Accomplished. There was is a game with a minimum of 4 players. And I wrote this game, and I took this game to Kickstarter, and the response that I got, and people were right to make this response, I want to specify that. People went, Jeff, you're the 2-player games guy. Why didn't you write a game that's compatible with 2 players? And I said, I don't know. I said, it's not. I was like, they were like, how do you play your game with 2 players? 2-player games guy. And I said, you honest to goodness cannot. It literally will not work. Not only does it not work with 2 players, it does not work with 3. You need a minimum of 4 people at that table to make this game work. And I, for a long time, and, you know, people will ask me, hey, Jeff, what's a game that you can't play on Party of One that you really wish you could? And I'm like, it's the one that I wrote. It's the one that I created. It's the one with my name on it is the one that I can't play on the show. So I'm not ashamed to admit that partially the reason that those alternate modes of play are in the book was so that nobody went to me and said, haha, you wrote a 3-player game, 2-player game guy.
Another one.
Be like, not today. Not today. So it's like, and related to that, point B, because I am nothing if not a shameless marketer at all times. I was like, okay, I'm gonna feature this on Party of One, which means I need a set of 2-player rules in the book so I can justify this being an episode of Party of One. But the truth is, like, it was a lot of just, like, thinking about, like, how the game worked. And, like, it was very consciously, and part of it is also, like, I love solo RPGs. I play a lot of them when I'm sitting around. Like, I love solo play. I love single player games. And, like, as I was kind of, like, fiddling with the mechanics and thinking through, like, okay, this is how this is gonna work, it kind of came very naturally to kind of, like, once I wrote the 2-player rules, then I was able to kind of be like, the single player rules just fell into place. But, like, it was a lot of, I wanted to make sure, I like a lot when games put why or how things work in the text. Like, I love games that include not just, like, what the rules are, but why they are the way they are. And I want, and the 2-player mode of the game and the single-player mode of the game is kind of me explaining that a little bit, to explain, like, look, here's why here's what these roles are, and if you're gonna remove this element, here's what this is gonna look like. Like here's how you should compensate if you're gonna remove this piece of the puzzle. If you're gonna remove one of the 3 players that is recommended for the game, here's what is more important so that you don't get a weird bad experience. So if the 2-player version, the recommendation is like, if you're gonna get rid of a player, get rid of the villain and have the villain role, have you be the city and me be the hero, and then we just kind of mutually agree on what the villain stuff is. Because and the reason that I specify that, and it's in the text, and I think it's a thing that I like when designers talk about this stuff in text, is it says very clearly, because the hero and the city are the more important of the 3. Like the relationship between hero and city is more central to the themes of the game than the relationship between hero and villain or villain and city. Like it is more, you're gonna lose more by either removing the hero, I'm not even sure what that would look like, or removing the city. If you remove the hero and we make that a shared role between us, then what that looks like is we kind of lose the sense of really getting to reflect on like what the hero's journey is. If we remove the city player and we kind of mutually share that role, you kind of lose the everyday element of it. Like you were saying, like it kind of becomes a bit more of a superhero story where it's all just generic skyscrapers and there's no Joe's Deli.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of break down, like, as the designer of the game, like if you're gonna remove a part, here's the part that I would suggest you remove, and here's how I suggest you compensate it. Because I think, like, as a designer, like the design perspective is, I think it's really interesting to put those types of observations into play, right? Like I think it's really interesting to put those kind of observations into the text of the game, to say like, here's why this rule is in place, and if you're gonna mess with this rule, here's what you need to keep in mind.
I love it. I think even talking about how you probably wouldn't do a hero and villain version, my brain is tickled on 2 ideas that just came up. One, I totally see a supplement where you do like a relationship, like, because we mentioned, no, not we mentioned. I was looking at a TikTok post on Twitter from Chris Bissett, who was recommending great tarot card games, and the one Tension by Adira Slattery is about great game. Yeah, great game. Is about the murderer and the person who's trying to catch the murderer. And I think it'd be an interesting supplement to do like a hero and villain kind of specific game, and like it's a relationship building game. And I think
I like that. That would be interesting.
Yeah. That'd be like it's a framework to attach a person to their antithesis, right? Because I think a lot of superhero stories are like that 3 thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis, right? Like that sort of narrative character arc. So I think that'd be an interesting supplement. The second thing that I thought about, I've had a couple people on here talk about put designer notes into the game, and how, like, what are you doing if you remove this piece? Like, what am I warning you against if you try to remove these pieces from the game? And I've also seen conversations about SRDs or licensing, Creative Commons. And what if there was, this is more of like a business side brain thing that's happening.
I love business side talk. This is my favorite.
But a lot of people give the SRD away for like free or like a low amount of money. But now I think of like adding designer notes of, hey, when you purchase this game, you are also purchasing the license to SRD it, right? This is the full game. It has a setting. It has all this art, whatever. But there are going to be acronomic pieces. Is that a word? Acronyms, you know, like this section is SRD material, and you are open to hacking it, right? So I think about this license purchase business model thing that could also come from that designer input of like, hey, when you recreate this game for your game, you're welcome to use this piece of the hero, the city, the villain. But the thing you can't use is like quote unquote can't use because you could probably hide something enough, scrape off enough serial numbers that you can use whatever you know, to some extent. I'm not trying to police your game, but I don't know.
I scraped the serial numbers off of Spider-Man and called it anyone can wear the mask. I can't judge you. I can't come to you.
But I think there's
I did not write the quote anyone can wear the mask. Shockingly,
exactly.
That was not a Jeff Stormer brain creation.
Also, the cover for Anyone Can Wear the Mask is a very
God, Eli!
It's such a powerful, so smart.
Eli crushed it so much. He just the art and the layout. Eli Forbes and Blue Tuesdays just like wrecked it in the best possible way.
Yeah,
every step of the way, I was like. And really, truly, the story is that I tweeted out, like, hey, does anybody do, like, comic book superhero-y stuff that wants to work on a game? And they both responded. And I looked at their stuff, and I was like, you two. I'll work with both of you separately, but, like, I want... And literally, like, every time they delivered me a thing, I just sat on the couch and, like, sat next to Jen and was like, Jen, look at the thing. It's... Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's very good. I get an immediate sense of what I'm playing right off the rip.
I'm so happy.
Right off the
rip.
Right off the rip. But yeah, these two that concept and then the concept of like purchasing SRD purchasing the license as you purchase the game is a cool business concept that I might consider.
Something that and kind of what bouncing off of that, like something that like popped into my head is. And I know people have probably done this. Like I'm certain this is Jeff Stormer inventing a concept that I'm sure already exists. The idea of buying the director's commentary edition, where it's like the text of a game and then a whole little extra call out blurb of like. Here's what's important to me about this. Like, here's why this piece of text is really important. That's something that I'm going to be considering, frankly. And probably with Anyone Can Wear the Mask, because as this conversation is illustrated, there's a lot of stuff that I could point to and be like, if you like this moment in the game, you should check out this comic book because it has this moment that's really important to me.
That'd be so fun. That would be fun.
Jeremy,
fuck.
Yeah, there it is. There's our one F-bomb. We dropped it with purpose and intent. We got that. That's really good. That's a really good. The idea.
What a fun way to have a conversation with the person reading the book, right?
And being able to like have a conversation with I'm excited about the idea of this, like writing it. I mean, this is probably going to be a thing that makes it into the final product. But the idea of like writing this thing now, like writing it now and not while the game is in production is exciting to me as an idea in terms of like I am now having a conversation with this finished product, right? Like I am going back and reading things and going, here's why I said this. Oh, I didn't even realize I was thinking about this topic. That's really good.
It's really good. And to also like connect two worlds, right? Because like I love Anyone Can Wear the Mask, but I do not know dick about comic books. I've seen superhero animations, I've seen superhero movies, so I have like a general sense, but I can imagine that a comic book narrative structure is, and I read a lot of manga, so I'm tangentially there, but I'm not in it, right? I don't have any like place of like, how do I start with comic books?
Yeah.
Doing that director's specifically for you and Anyone Can Wear the Mask, doing a director's commentary, we both talk about the rules, but also like, I took this from issue, et cetera, from, like, it's a gateway piece to putting people into another hobby if they so choose to dive in, right? And I think that's, that can be exponentially resonant for the product in of itself, at least in my opinion.
I really love that idea, and I think I'm going to have to run with it.
yeah, let it rip. You can have that one for free, Jeff.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Great. Well, that's Anyone Can Wear the... I think that's a good amount of information for Anyone Can Wear the Mask. I would buy it off of this podcast from that. Amazing.
Well, good news. You can.
First up is the trends section of the show. Jeff, as always, trends. What are you seeing in your social commentaries, your Twitter threads, your Discords, your own personal like game design ethos? Trends that you're seeing that are really cool for the industry that you're like thumbs upping or want to point like highlight. What are some trends that you feel like are rearing their ugly heads and maybe you want to caution people that are maybe like being detractful to either the narratives that you're surrounding or anything like that, other than sort of the obvious ones, right? And then something that's like hidden and sliming its way through. Or what are some trends within you that you want to speak into the ethos so that anyone listening to this can kind of just take it and run away with it?
Well, you know what I love to talk about here, Jeremy? You know what I love talking about?
Walk
It's
me
one of
through it.
one of my favorite topics is me. It's this guy right here. I want to talk about a trend that I have done, and it's relevant to anyone can wear the mask, and I'm excited to talk about it because it's specific to the game and a trend that's happening right now, and that I'm really excited to see people playing with, and that is a concept that now has a name, and I want to talk about itch funding because it's great.
Cool.
It's a cool
Yep.
idea. It's exciting. Yep. I'm all about it. I'm excited that it has a name to it. The idea of like people building crowdfunding tools into like non-crowdfunding platforms. So the literal example is building your itch.io page and going, here's how much money I want to make with this product. Here's what happens if I make that money. Here's what happens if I make more than this amount of money. Building what we did for Anyone Can Wear the Mask that like was a really like I was really happy about was like taking Kickstarter reward tiers and just offering them and being like, I'll run a game. You know, you give me a chunk of money, I'll run a game for you. Like I would have offered that had I brought this game to Kickstarter. So I will just offer that to you now. Like you can just have that. It's exciting, and I think it's a really exciting way to see people develop, like people build a marketing platform for themselves in a way that is uniquely optimized. Like it's taking the tools that worked elsewhere and building them into and applying them across the board in a way that's really exciting to me, and I'm really excited to see that developing across the board. It's just it feels cool to see that taking shape and see people kind of going, just kind of asking the question of like, why can't I release this version of my game and say, hey, if 100 people buy this, I will pay for art and layout. Like that's cool and exciting, and like I'm excited to see it developing, and like I have a lot of thoughts about how it fits into sort of the game design world and whether or not it's a full-on replacement for Kickstarter. My hottest take is even as someone of the people that has been sort of like flag bearing the idea, it's like I don't think it's a full-on replacement, but I think it's a practice that we should be practicing even if it's not. I don't know. It's exciting and cool, and I'm into it. And seeing people do things with it that I never thought to do with it, that I didn't think to do with Mask, is like really exciting to me.
I think what's interesting here, and we could probably, the second sort of lightning round portion of the segments is sort of a tip, TLDR tip, like if someone wants to scrub all the way to the end and find something, give me those watch hour or listen hours for free or whatever. But I think we'll combine these conversations because I think there's a lot of things that can come in, because you, like you said, you've been the flag bearer. You've been sort of the propagator of the itch funding idea, at least in tandem with the greening conversation from the Brain Trust podcast between Will and Adam. I think that there are a lot of pieces to talk about here in the marketing sphere as well, which was what I was going to ask you anyways. Yep. But I had a conversation with Tracy Barnett about a week or two ago, and had been aware that you had a conversation with them regarding sort of like market funneling and everything like that. Yep. And they recently changed their structure of sort of this itch funding, crowdfunding concept, is that on their Patreon, they said, no matter what amount of tier you purchase on, you will get access to all of my content at the same time, whether you pay me $1 or $20. And obviously they've structured it so that, you know, it's 1, 5, 15, 20, like all the options are there. Yeah. All the standard like Patreon options are there. But to create work for themselves and create sort of this altruistic crowdfunding motion, which I also think itch funding is also attempting to do, at least in my experience, what I'm seeing other people doing, is that, hey, when I reach 75 patrons, I will start to work on an update to this game, or I will add art to this game, or whatever Tracy's plan is when it comes to those amounts.
Oh, it's a really great approach, and it's hugely exciting.
And the reason that came from, I think what that idea came from, Tracy was pointing out to me, is that you had a conversation with them about sort of this cycle funneling.
Yeah,
so you have,
yeah.
I know you know, but just to show that what I've heard,
Sure.
I will not get it exactly right, I promise, is that, there's the top layer of the funnel where people are sort of hearing about your stuff, and you're trying to get them down to buy the product, right? You get them down, you get them to the place where they can buy it, they buy it, and then the last sort of portion is that they're talking about it.
Yeah,
and then you cycle that through, because the people who talk about it make people who hear about it, and that starts the funnel all over again.
You pretty much got it exactly right. It's
perfect.
It's the top of the funnel is awareness. It is people becoming aware of you, aware of your work, aware of the things that you are offering, or the problems that they were not aware that they had. And then there's the middle of the funnel, which is you going, well, if you have this, if you're looking for this thing, if you have this problem, if you're addressing this thing, here's some ways that you can address it, such as including this thing that I have. And then the bottom of the funnel is, I have this thing and you should buy it. And then once you're out of the funnel, exactly right. You encourage them to talk about the thing that they did, because then you can cycle it back around and spread that awareness. It is it's the core of marketing. It's what powers like the actual 9-to-5 marketing work that I do. And it gets me excited. It turns out I really like marketing.
Yeah. I also, for anyone that's been recently listening to the show, I am also very business minded. I'm very entrepreneurial minded. My dad was very entrepreneurial minded, and so I think I get a lot of that from him. He had like a car washing business, a limousine service. He used to be a landscaping contractor. He built our house. He added additions to our house. He helped plot out for like a Suburba back in California. He was a musician. He played a bunch of different instruments. He was just a man of many hats that never graduated high school and wanted to make his own life for himself. And I always look up to him for that. And so, Dad, if you're listening, hi, I like you. And there
also, my dad, if you're listening to this, I also like you. You're probably not, but I feel like it's nice to put it out there.
Yeah, same. But I think that there is something to examine here when it comes to thinking about the different structures in which your business can take shape. And what I like about Tracy's model is that what they're basically saying is, for $1 a month, I am propositioning you to talk about my game. At minimum, $1 a month to talk about my content, so that you can bring other people who are willing to pay $1 a month. Maybe bring in people who are willing to pay $5 a month. It's whatever the value for the consumer is, right? And so I think it's really important I love that you brought up itch funding. I love that we're talking about it. I love that we're talking about marketing. And this podcast is not just about the fun of game design, which is cool. It's certainly a portion of it, but it's also for people who are like, I want to make game design something that sustains my lifestyle. Yeah. And we have to talk about business, and sometimes business things can be scary, but it's a necessity if that's the direction you want to, if that is the direction you want to go into. And so, with your itch funding prep, what have you sort of found? What have you changed on? What have you iterated on since starting the distillation of what Kickstarter is, and trying to get that into a different space that's a little less rat race-y, right?
What I found, the thing that I found, the one real, and this kind of bleeds into like the tip that I would give people, and Tracy's model, I think, is a perfect illustration of it. What I did with Mask is a really good illustration of it. And that is that all of the rules are fake and that nothing matters.
Yeah.
Which sounds sounds like harsh or extreme or worrying, but like what I mean by that is like you can do like there is a model, like the principles of marketing are sound, right? Like they've been tested, they've been shown to work. They follow a logical pattern. But like everything else, like assumed wisdom is kind of not really like we're in such a small weird niche industry that like, and like the internet is so large and nebulous, and like taking like the shape of things is so like non-existent that like you can kind of build things however you think is going to be the right model for your, you know, like put thought into it, apply like good marketing practices to it, get, you know, but like Tracy's model like works and is good and is strong, and like you know, like the conventional wisdom is like if you're gonna do a big push and you want to pay for art for your game and you want to pay for all these extra things, you got to do a Kickstarter. And like I didn't, and I still paid for those things. Like those things are all gonna get paid for, and the reason is because I took those practices that I was gonna do on a Kickstarter and I didn't do them on Kickstarter. Like like. But, like, at the same time, like, what I did for Anyone Can Wear the Mask might not work for you for your project, but you might have a model that, like, is going to work for you that's entirely not going to work for me, right? Like,
yeah.
Like, there are, like, and you could even point to, like, people who do the, like, I'm going to design a little mini game every month on my Patreon, and that's going to be my Patreon. Like Adam Vass, right? Like, Adam Vass designs a game every month, and like, that works. Like, it works really well, and, like, that I could never do that. Like I do not have that kind of game design energy, but like that's the thing, is like it's finding a model that works for you and using the tools that we have in front of us and kind of stepping back and saying, okay, what if, right? Like or even more so than what if, like why do I have to be running a Kickstarter in order for people to give me $150 to run a game for them? Like, why do I, like, if I've published a game, why do I have to be on Kickstarter to say, if you give me X amount of money, you can write a piece of, you can co-write a piece of this game? Why do I have to limit the things that I give to people based on how much they give me on Patreon? Like, why, like all of these things, asking why, you'll find the times where you're like, I don't think there's a reason that I have to do this. I think I can do this without this, or I can do this on this other platform, or I can do this in this other way. And that is like hugely exciting to me. That is a hugely exciting concept to me.
Yeah, I think that there is something to the obvious answer is not always the best answer. I think that what's important to pull from all of that is sort of the summation of like, everyone goes to Kickstarter to get a big sum of money for their game. Sure, maybe in a short amount of time, but like if you have a day job, if this is your situation and you're not trying to like just bust out 10 grand for whatever reason, there are slower burn methods that will probably put your mind at ease, right? You can I think the idea is that I think people think that you talked about those best principles for marketing, but I think people only look at the surface layer of what they think are the base principles of marketing. They're like, you have to have this many Twitter followers, or you have to have this many Instagram followers, or you have to abuse this part of the algorithm or something like that. I know of a Twitter personality, their name is Chiran. That's Xiran. I've never heard them say their name, but so that's probably wrong. But Chinese historical analyzer has a really big like following in terms of like when Mulan came out, really went with like what did they capture, what didn't they capture, in terms of making that movie as with suspension of disbelief as realistic as possible. Has 3 videos on YouTube. That's it, 3 videos on YouTube. Now, Twitter personality, 3 videos on YouTube. That YouTube channel has like 100,000 subscribers for just 3 videos that have not been put out in any consistent manner whatsoever. And like, it's absolutely like that works for her. You know what I mean? Like that works for her. She doesn't need to go she's doing her own thing. She's using Twitter in the way that she feels comfortable. She's putting up whatever content she feels is necessary. And I think what's important to snatch from this portion of the episode is that marketing is flexible, and it's flexible for you. And this is me speaking personally, and how I think about marketing is that I would be cautious of what everyone says is the right way, because I don't think that there is a right way to approach speaking to people, because that's what marketing is at the very end of the day. It's communicating an idea to others, right?
Yep. I agree 100%. I think you find the model that works for you, and it's going to be a huge success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. What would you, so thinking about Itch Funding, thinking about your models, thinking about Anyone Can Wear the Mask or any future projects, what are you like iterating upon? What are you thinking that you might do a little bit differently than approach like the stretch goal Kickstarter thing, if anything?
The thing that I think I'm going to do differently, like next time around or in the future, is it's a really great question. I want to say nothing.
Let it marinate.
Nothing. I'm perfect.
Yeah. That's why I've taken all the erasers off my pencils. I don't make mistakes.
I don't make mistakes. I think the thing that I want to change is like I'm less interested, and this is the change that I want to make, honestly, like, and I say this partially because Mission Accomplished is just now wrapping up.
Jeff salutes every time he said, that's why I'm laughing.
It's in the title. It's in the title. I can't
Salute.
put in the text in the title, but like I can at least do it. The game is wrapping up. Like the Kickstarter's wrapping up. Fulfillment of I think like 3/4 of the books of the last like round of shipping are out to the people. I'm not really interested in doing another print run.
Sure.
It's just not, and that's probably the thing that I'm going to do differently is like the thing I'm going to do differently is like do less. So the first answer is like I'm not really interested in print runs, and I would have to have someone that I was confident could do it for me if I were to do a print run. The other answer, the broader answer that ties into that is like get people that know things better than I know stuff, right? Like like there were bumps in the road with the art and the layout where like I was like, oh, it would be cool if this, but like I didn't have the words to put it into words. And I'm like, I could just give someone money to do that. Like art directors exist. Like I could just be like, hey, I want to give you a chunk of money to talk to these two people with a vision, an artistic vision. I could just do that. Like, I realized working with Anyone Can Wear the Mask, the value in having people work on a thing when their expertise, right? Like people who know their thing. And I want to do that more. I want to be able to point more to people and say, you know a thing. Do this. Do the thing that you know. Like you know this thing better than I do. I'm a little tired of wearing all of the hats, and I want to start working with more people and giving more people an opportunity to wear their one hat.
Yeah, I definitely. There's a YouTube channel I watch called The Future. It stars Christo. It's about the business of graphic design, or the business of design in general, visual design. But one of the things he always harps on is the collaboration and the team you're hiring. Like one of the business models he always pitches for free to people is like, look, be the middleman, connect all of the experts in the room, figure out what their quotes are, quote for that to your, quote that as your price to your, holy shit, customer, for lack of a more refined term.
Yeah, right, sure.
But it's about connecting these people and using their expertise to make your business flourish. And I don't mean that in like a seedy way. I mean that like make sure everyone's getting paid because you're quoting for the budget that person is quoting you for, and then you're adding a little bit on top for yourself for connecting all those people, right? So I think a lot of people ignore the role of connector because they don't want to do the project management of touching base with all those people. And I think what you're saying, and something that I love to think about, is that I am never going to be a visual artist. Like, I know I want to be a game designer and I know some things about visual design, but I am not going to take the steps to feel like I have mastery over that skill. But I know that there are people out there who have done that and who are interested in games and who are interested in the genres that I'm trying to produce. They have to exist out there. There are, 8 billion, 9 billion, 12 billion people on the planet, 11 billion? I don't know what the consensus is. But someone out there knows the thing I want, and they can get it in a more articulate language than I can.
Yeah. People know things I don't, and I want to work with those people. Absolutely.
I think there is something to think about. Stop trying to be the person that wears all the hats, because I think it comes from the same place as being like starting a brick and mortar business. You're always going to be the cheapest employee you can ever have, but that's not going to let you make your business flourish. You also can't work the 9 to 5 of your business being open, then marketing, then ordering, then administrating, then working with your tax person because you're at the business working 9 to 5 with your customers. Like there's a lot of things that have to be done to make a piece of economic content come to fruition, and you need to understand that it takes a village. As trite as that sentence is, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true.
100%.
Yeah. I think that's a really good analysis of also like just crowdfunding in general, right? We see it for Kickstarters and their stretch goals anyways. We see people like, if I meet a stretch goal, I'm going to hire this person to do this setting work or whatever have you, or to do this visual design. So just extend it a little bit more and say, cool, I'm looking to do art for this, but first I have to get an artistic director, and that's going to come with the stretch goal cost. And like, here are the people I'm looking to hire. We've had conversations. This is their budgets. This is the stretch goal. Like, and if we make that on the itch fund, bueno, like you're going to get it. We're all going to be happier for it. I want to hire an editor, right? Because I'm not a perfect editor. I'm going to miss something in my own work no matter how many times I glaze over it over the course of these next months. So let me get that person in here, right? Layout, all those things. So yeah, very good. I think that's definitely a necessary component to the crowdfunding model that I think sometimes we see not happen. And I think that's where the horror stories start to come in from Kickstarter. Is like, it's so overwhelming because I'm trying to execute all these project management things by myself while also being the game designer. And I think people should just let themselves be the game designer and get that project manager.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, any last marketing, like, where can people go to, like, is there a resource that people can go to learn these sort of like marketing principles that you sort of shadowed at earlier in the statement?
Yes. Let me find out the exact the exact URL. But yes. There's a resource that I used.
Power of podcast editing.
A tool, like an honest to goodness tool that I've used a lot, that I think is strong, and like it takes a little bit of like flipping around and searching through it and like bouncing around on it. But like how I learned this was like, I work as a marketing writer in my 9 to 5, and like what they did when I started was they were like, we use a service called HubSpot. Here's their blog. Read the HubSpot blog, learn things. And I went, okay. So like, honest to goodness marketing resources, like HubSpot's blog is really good and has like a lot of really good marketing advice. And like a lot of it is just free blog posts and like stuff like that. Like marketing books and blogs, I think often have a kind of a bad reputation among like artistic circles.
Yeah.
And like, I learned a lot reading HubSpot stuff. Like it's a service that I gained a lot of stuff from. And I think like reading stuff that people in marketing are recommending that other marketers use to learn about marketing is a valuable tool. So that is at least a starting place. It requires some bouncing around from blog topics, but at least gives you a place to start.
Yeah, I think that's very cool. And yeah, I feel the same way. I think a lot of people think about marketing guru books or anything of that nature, and there probably are a fair share of them. They're like
a lot
the
of them
fake
are
guru.
predatory trash, and
Yeah.
But like at least HubSpot is like a service that like is a company that does this for a living, and like you can point to them and be like, well, they at least know what they're talking about for X, Y, and Z.
That's very good. Thank you for sharing that with us. And with that, I think that's going to bring us to the top of the episode. Jeff, it has been absolute metric fuck ton pleasure to have you here. I'll use it again. I don't.
Oh my god.
Fuck. Where can people find you, connect with you? All of these links that Jeff is about to share with us will be in the show notes below for your access.
You can find my work at jeffstormer.com. You can find Party of One at partyofonepodcast.com. You can find all my fantasy children at oneshotpodcast.com because it's part of the One Shot Podcast Network. And you can follow me on Twitter at Party of One Pod. But also, wait, I forgot one. You can find Anyone Can Wear the Mask at jeffstormer.itch.io/mask.
Yes.
Can't believe I almost forgot that one.
Buy the game. It'll be in the show notes.
All right, good.
Buy the game. It's very good. I'll probably also link to Beyond the Rift so people can see that source material as well.
Also, I'm gonna pull up the URL so that people listening to it also hear it. Because yes, go buy Beyond the Rift.
I always like to, if I can, add the link for like the inspiration game. At least recently. Recently, I have enjoyed doing that. I'm learning, people.
We learn something every day.
Literally every day.
Go to mnemonicrpg.itch.io. That's mnemonicrpg.itch.io. And then go to Mnemonic Beyond the Rift. It's the game that inspired Anyone Can Wear the Mask. It is breathtakingly good. I am obsessed with it. I love it to this. I still go back and reread it time and time again. It's real good. So go buy it.
With that, everyone, thank you so much for being here with us today. I learned a lot from Jeff. I certainly hope you did too. And we will catch you next time. Say bye to the people, Jeff.
Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.
All right, that's a wrap. Thank you for taking the time to sit down and hang out with Jeff and I. We really appreciate it. You can find links and resources down below in the show notes, such as getting in touch with Jeff or other episodes with similar topics. If you want to be a part of the conversation, please come and join the community Discord server. Also, make sure to subscribe to the Draw Your Dice Patreon, where you can get access to early releases of episodes from as soon as we interview. Thanks again for stopping by, and as always, I will catch you next time.